Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll be doing an in-depth polygel tutorial from start to finish for these tiger print nails. We'll be going over prep, application, shaping, and nail art, so if you're a beginner, this tutorial is perfect for you, and I hope you enjoy. Before we get started, if you didn't already know, I do have my own nail brand and nail products that we'll be using in this video. We have polygels, art gels, gel polishes, and brushes, and we also just released our new Whimsy Halloween collection. You can shop all of our products at doperthanyournails.com. Use code YouTube to save 10% at checkout. The link will be in the description. Our newest collection, a Whimsy Halloween, which is what you're seeing in this video, just released on the 10th, and it is available now as a full collection or individual shades. This is our best collection yet, so I just wanted to give a quick reminder. So if you haven't seen the in-depth video for this already going over this collection, you can check that out in my most recent video, the one before this. I've posted a bunch of other content with this collection as well, and I'll be posting more looks with it throughout spooky season. These solid shades are also incredible. They are a one coat coverage, and the colors I feel are pretty unique for this collection and just year round to use for pretty much any occasion. Very excited to have cat eyes and solid shades in our inventory and catalog, so be sure to check out this collection if you haven't already. So let's get into this tiger print nail set. So we are starting off with our nail prep. I'm taking a cuticle pusher and I'm pushing back the cuticle as gently as I can, but also trying to be very thorough, get into those corners as well. I had quite a bit of cleanup to do, so I'm just taking my time here and trying to be gentle, but clean everything up and get into all those sides as I mentioned. And once we do that, we are going to take a 240 grit sanding band. This is a very fine grit sanding band. We're gonna go ahead and season the edges as well against our nail file. This is just gonna help prevent any cuts or anything like that. And I'm using this at a pretty low speed. The clips are a little bit sped up, but I'm using it at a speed between 4 to 5 RPMs with my e-file. And I'm just going over the surface of the nail and over the area that we kind of went with our cuticle pusher, just to make sure everything is nice and clean, but just be careful not to overfile. I just try to go everything once to make sure everything is clean. Now we're gonna get our nail tips ready. I'm just trying to make sure that they fit sidewall to sidewall and they're not too big and not too small either. You wanna make sure that they go from sidewall to sidewall without having to apply too much pressure. If they're too small, they might pop right off. If they're too big, you'll have a lot of plastic kind of hanging out. But if you are in between sizes, it's probably going to be better to go a little bit bigger and file down. But I just try to make sure that I have a nice transition from the nail down, from the nail bed down, kind of like I'm showing here, a straight line, especially for square. The wrong size tips can really throw off how they look. They can end up looking more bulky. They can end up looking too skinny if they're too small, like more of a coffin. So it's extra important with square nails. Now I'm just taking some Young Nail Swipe and dehydrating. You'll know if your nail prep is good if your nails kind of do this once you've swiped over the nail surface. For nail glue, I like to use a brush-on glue. This is also from Young Nails. So a lot of my prep products are from Young Nails. I've used them for pretty much since the beginning of my nail journey, and I really love their products. So I like to use their brush-on glue, put on a little bit of that, and then just hold down the nail tip for about 10 seconds. And this is my favorite glue to use. I think using a brush-on glue can be helpful because you can really control where you are applying the product. You want to concentrate more of the glue in the center and then just kind of let it gently sweep out to the sides. And then just hold down for about 10 seconds and you should be good to go. Then we are going to take our tip cutter. This is a nail tip cutter, and then I've attached some magnets to it, and then I just usually do all the sizes of the tips based on the magnets, whatever length I'm going for. And I'm also adding a bit of a C curve to the end of the nail. You could do that right now before application. You could also do that after application, totally up to you, but it definitely helps make your nail tips look a little bit less bulky. And then we are just making sure the nail tip is flush with the natural nail, but we're keeping our nail tip, we're not trying to file away too much. We're trying to make sure that everything is nice and flush, but if you file away too much, the nail tip will definitely become pretty weak. I mean, it is a plastic nail tip. We just wanna make sure everything is looking nice and even before we go in for application. But again, we can go ahead and clean this up during shaping as well. So we're gonna go ahead and dust off with alcohol to get rid of all that dust. Then take some Young Nails Protein Bond. This is my primer. and this is also going to help with your retention, so you definitely want to use a primer of some sort on the natural nail. Let that air dry before going in with a gel base coat. I am using the Goy gel base coat. It is an affordable option, but I will say it is very thin and runny, so if you're not using a very thin layer, it's kind of gonna run all over the place. So I'm like 50-50 on recommending it, but it is a good option. I know I've been mentioning for a long time we're working on a base coat for my brand. I promise it is still in the works, and I just found like a piece of dog hair in my nail. I have a German Shepherd, so that happens sometimes, where dog hair gets everywhere. But anyways, we are going to take our slip solution 70% isopropyl alcohol. I have also already cured the gel base coat. We're gonna make sure that it's cured and not wipe off the sticky layer. This is our polygel brush. This is the brush that we sell on our website, and this is what I use for my application. It has a bigger brush head and an acetone resistant handle. We're gonna dip it into our 70% isopropyl alcohol. This is gonna help mold our polygel, but we don't want our brush to be oversaturated because the liquid will get everywhere. We also don't want our brush to be extremely dry because you do need a little bit of liquid to help mold the polygel. So I try to aim for something in the middle. I would recommend dipping your brush in and then kind of swiping the excess off on a lint-free wipe 2 to 3 times, something like this. And for our polygels today, here are the options. These are all of our neutral polygels, and I promise we have new colors in the works. The new colors are going to be very different, so stay tuned for that. So here are the 4 colors. We have Coquette Blush, we have Pink Essence, we have Wispy Peach, and Desert Rose. Wispy Peach and the third one are definitely our most popular. So this is the one that we're gonna go for today. I feel like it would look nice with the tiger print design. So I'm just taking the first bead here and I'm flattening that out with my brush just a little bit, something like this. We don't wanna flatten it out completely, but we are just starting to mold and shape it to the shape of the nail tip. That is gonna be your guide. We are gently patting, and then once it's patted down to our liking, we are dragging gently. Gently is the key here. Work on top of the product, don't stab into the product. Our polygel is a pretty medium consistency. It's not too sticky or stiff, so you shouldn't have too many problems with the product getting stuck in your brush or the product running everywhere. Temperature can affect things, so if it is really hot, you can stick it in the fridge for a few minutes, and as we get into the colder seasons, if it's a little bit stiff, you can just hold it in your hands for a couple of minutes, or you could put it, like the tube itself, not open, in a little bit of hot water. But we are just working on the second bead here. I do cure between the 2 beads. So for the cuticle bead, I like to just tuck it into the cuticle area and then drag the rest down, but I will show again for the rest of the nails. Just cleaning off the excess on the edge here, and this is how our application is looking. And we are gonna go ahead and repeat on all 5 nails. So you can use a small tool like this to take out the polygel, or you can squeeze directly onto the nail, up to you. We're gonna take our first bead here, kind of where the nail tip meets the natural nail, flatten it out a little bit, working on top of that product gently, just patting and dragging. And if it looks a little bit thin for some of the nails, that's okay. We're gonna go in with the second bead. And I do like to clean my brush in between application as needed, just because a clean brush is gonna help make application easier. So you can do this as needed. I usually don't have to do it until like the very end, but I just kind of wanted to show it. So we are taking our second bead, the first bead is cured, and we're tucking it into the cuticle area using the edges of our brush. You can also use your brush to kind of swipe backwards as well to smooth out the other way. That's the great thing about polygel. It's not going to cure until you put it into the lamp, but it has the look and strength of acrylic nails, but a lot more lightweight. You'll notice when you wear square nails like this with polygel versus acrylic, they're going to feel a lot lighter. And I am constantly swiping those sidewalls as well to remove any excess product. And here's a closer look at the cuticle area, just tucking into those corners using the edges of my brush. The brush has a tapered head like this, so it really helps with that. And just making sure the edges are covered very nicely to the best of my ability. Go ahead and cure that. And here we go with our third nail, placing that bead in the middle. And you can see once I place it down, I'm kind of working it towards the center and then flattening it out, trying to make sure it's kind of like a perfect ball before flattening. We're gonna swipe backwards. I try to make this first bead as flat as I can, but with structure, if that makes sense. If it's too bulky, it can throw off your shape a little bit. So you don't want that first bead to be overly bulky if you are doing the 2-bead method. The second bead is gonna add in any remaining structure that you need. So because it's overlapping with the first bead as well, right? So I'm dragging that down a little bit. Then we're gonna go back and swipe backwards just to work it closer to the cuticle area, and then go ahead and start tucking that in. And as you can see, every time we're working on the cuticle bead, we're working from beneath the cuticle area and we are tucking towards it. We are not placing directly on the cuticle area. And then we're gonna go ahead and drag down. While this nail may look a little bit thin, I think that something like this actually works really well. You don't need a huge apex. There is a nice transition from the cuticle area where it's more flush, then it rises up. So even if your nails are like this length, you don't need to worry about them breaking if you build your structure correctly. You don't need them to be, you don't need a super high apex, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but apex is a personal preference. But I guess I'm just trying to show that, you know, even with a nail like that, you shouldn't have any problem with it breaking or snapping off. I personally have not had that issue, and this is the method that I use for my nails personally. So here we go with the fourth nail. The first bead was a little bit thin, but that's okay. I think it's always better to apply thinner and then go back and add more if you can, especially for square. Something about square, it's very easy to mess up the shape of during application versus like almond. I just filmed an almond set, and with that I just did like the 1-bead method, which I'm excited to show because I feel like I never show the 1-bead method, but I might try to start showing that more to make, you know, to add more variety and kind of how I'm showing you guys how you can do different things. But we're just finishing up the pinky here, tucking in that second bead into the cuticle area and then dragging down. Again, the nail tip is pretty much my guide. After application, your nails are going to have a sticky layer. That's just the inhibition layer, and that's pretty much standard across all gel products. You just want to take a lint-free wipe with some alcohol and wipe that off. Then we are taking our e-file. I use the Melody Susie e-file. I always wear safety glasses, a mask. I use a dust collector. If you don't have a dust collector, please invest in one. Being safe and using protection during shaping and when doing nails in general is very important. There is a lot of dust that can be generated when you're shaping, so it's important to protect your lungs and so on and so forth. So we are taking our 5-in-1 bit and we are just keeping that parallel to the nail plate, and we are starting to clean up that cuticle area. I'm using this at a low speed, about 4 to 5 RPMs, and you want to let the drill bit do the work for you. You don't want to press into the nail. You want to let it just gently clean up any excess product as needed. I also like to use it under the nail to clean up any excess product. You can also use it to kind of carve out that C curve as needed. And I also use this to shape the rest of the nail. There is another bit that I normally use, but I've kind of stopped using it because it's becoming way too easy to overfile with it. I think once you get to a certain point in your nail journey, and this is always a good thing when you need less tools to shape, but I will show you just for the sake of, you know, showing another product or tool that you can use. But let's repeat that on the next nail. So we are taking our 5-in-1 bit in the cuticle area and we are just cleaning up, making sure that product is flush, but also making sure there's a nice transition from the edge of the cuticle area to the apex. If there's any kind of harsh ridges or lines, this is a great time to just go ahead and clean that up. I am also using it under the nail, and then I'm using it over the surface of the nail, as I mentioned, just going over the entire nail, kind of from side to side like this. Again, you want to keep your bit flat as you can, and then I try to go down the sides as well, but going over the surface like this kind of helps make that shape of where it's thinner on the sides and you want the bulk of your product in the center. That is typically the structure we are trying to go for, where more of the product is concentrated in the center versus the sides. That's kind of where you want the strength of the product to be. So when I'm going down the sides, I'm going down the other way like this. And then again, you can use it to carve out that C curve. If you feel like your square nails are looking bulky, try to add a little bit of a curve at the free edge, just like even the smallest amount. and you'll see a big difference in how it looks. I personally think that that looks better versus like more of a blocky shape, unless you want that shape. But if you feel like they look bulky, that can really help, is the point that I'm trying to make. So here I am just kind of showing the area that we're going for when filing. But you want to make sure that you don't remove too much product in that area. If that area doesn't have enough product or is not filled out proportionally, it will throw off the look of your nails, especially square nails. I remember when I was first starting, I could not figure out for the life of me why my nails did not look the way I wanted, but I was not putting enough product in the cuticle area, and when I was, it wasn't spread out evenly, it wasn't proportional, and there were times when there was too much product in that area, there were times when the product was too thin in that area. So the reason I'm sharing this is that I think with shaping, we tend to kind of just like follow a routine blindly, and that can be good too when you're starting because you kind of have to learn. But I think at some point it's really important to actually look at what you're shaping and why, and look at what areas actually need more shaping. Really try to kind of know the shape and structure you're going for, see what areas need more shaping. It's kind of like filling in pieces of a puzzle, right? If the top of the nail doesn't look the way that it's supposed to, and the free edge, like all of those different components can throw off the shape of a square nail. So things are looking pretty good just after using that one bit, but this is the bit that I was talking about that I don't really use anymore. For shaping at least, I can use it for debulking or removal when needed. This is a round panna bit, so I would recommend it if you are struggling as a beginner, but just be careful because it's very coarse. A good in-between option is a 5-in-1 bit that's a medium grit. I was using a fine grit one, but that one can also be great if you have more debulking to do or for removal. I tend to use that bit for fills. Now we're gonna go in and hand file. I'm using an 80/80 grit hand file. I am just kind of running another file over the edges so it's not too sharp. But this is absolutely my go-to file for hand shaping. I think the shaping is already looking really good, but this is gonna take it to that extra crispy level and really help under those sidewalls or areas that we didn't really use our e-file on. So I'm using this under the nail. So if there's any excess product under there, this is gonna help get rid of that. It's also gonna make sure that those sidewalls from underneath are nice and straight. Your nails and how they're looking even underneath the sidewalls and everything is also going to affect how they look from the top, you know, if there's any extra bulkiness and things like that. So I'm also gonna use this against the sidewalls, but you wanna make sure that you're using them at a very straight angle. You can see like the left versus right side, kind of the subtle difference after shaping. So you can use it kind of, I don't know, standing up is not the right word, but the file kind of upwards like this if you're worried about filing into the edge too much. If you do file kind of at an angle too much, it will turn into a coffin shape. So I just try to keep it as straight as I can. And then I am gonna go over the surface of the nail at least once, but I am trying to keep this minimal. Once I see that cloudy shape over the entire surface of the nail, I am not gonna touch it after that with that file. You can also use a less coarse file in the cuticle area or just in general if you'd like to. As I mentioned, the 80/80 grit hand file is pretty coarse, so it is gonna file the product faster than like a less coarse file, but I think running it over the surface once, for me at least, really ties the whole look together. And then you can use it on the free edge as well. So we're gonna go ahead and repeat. So I always start under the nails. I'm trying to stay away from those corners. If you nick those corners too much, it is also going to affect just like the C-curve and like how your nails look. So I try to keep it away from that as much as possible, or keep shaping in that area minimal. Then again, we're going against the sidewalls. I'm not going over the corners too much again, just trying to keep my file straight. And then I am just gently going over the surface of the nail, just looking for that cloudy look over the entire surface for the most part, just to know that I've pretty much hit everything and it's even. And then I kind of file at an angle. For the C-curve, you can just file at an angle to make sure that if you want the C-curve with the hand file, you can file at an angle like I was showing, 45-degree angle, or you can use an E-file. But you can already kind of see the subtle differences that hand filing, that it makes. So I would definitely recommend adding both into your routine. So we're just gonna go ahead and keep repeating. And one other tip that can help is when you're filing against the sidewalls, pull away after you file. Sometimes we tend to kind of pull inwards when we are kind of done with the motion of hand filing, so that can also kind of, you know, create like a coffin shape or angle things in too much. So it's kind of like a dramatic way of doing it, but it is a good routine to get into where you pull away once hand filing versus pulling in, because you might be filing inwards and not even realize it when you are adding pressure there. So we're gonna go ahead and file against the sidewalls again, and then over the surface as well. So you can kind of use a motion like this, and like I said, if there are areas that are more thicker, like on the sides, you know, we can go ahead and file down in that direction, because again, we want the product to be more thin on the sides and more thick, and not necessarily thick, but we want the most of the product kind of concentrated in the center, and we want the structure to look kind of like a curve basically. This video is very long. As you can see, it's a 30-minute video, but I hope it is helpful. I feel like it's been a while since I've done an in-depth polygel tutorial. And I know we're well into fall and spooky season, but I did still want to upload this Tiger Print polygel tutorial, just because I feel like the polygel prep, application, and shaping is super valuable. And who knows, who says you can't do a Tiger Print nail design during fall? So we're gonna go ahead and file the pinky. You do have to kind of hold your hand and fingers in a weird way sometimes when filing, especially with longer nails, or it can be a little bit uncomfortable from the pressure. So I'm always holding my fingers like this, especially with the pinky. I feel like that can be the pressure, you can definitely feel it if you're not holding or stabilizing your hand in some way. So anyways, here's how things are looking after all of that. And just to make sure everything is really smooth, this is not necessarily for shaping or debulking. This is just to make sure that the surface is smooth and we remove any scratches before adding our nail art. You can use a 240 grit standing band. This is the first way. So this is probably the fastest way and more precise because you're using an e-file. So you want to use this at not too high of a speed, because again, too high will start removing too much product in like the cuticle area and stuff and things like that. But it's also great for the C-curve area if you want to use that for that as well. The second way you can do this is just with a buffer, or my personal favorite way is with a buffer and a cuticle oil. If you really want an extra smooth finish, I would do both the e-file and the buffer and cuticle oil. But the cuticle oil, something about it just really smooths everything out and gives you a nice smooth surface for nail art. You just want to make sure you cleanse with alcohol and wash your hands and everything before going in with nail art to remove any of that oil. So let's get into the nail art. We are starting off with our French tips. I'm doing a little bit more of an old school Frenchy. The curve for the smile line for the French tip is not super exaggerated, but I'm gonna make it a little bit higher up on the other nails. I think it'll be more visible there, but it's kind of like an old school Frenchie. But once I draw in the smile line, the key with French tips is keeping your polish layers really thin and then using a brush to fill in the corners as needed. One coat polishes and everything are definitely great, but I just feel like for me personally, I like to actually use 2 thin coats just to make sure that I'm not adding too much bulk to the nail. Now I'm taking our Golden Hour gel polish, and so this Tiger Print look is gonna be a little bit more dimensional. So I'm taking our Golden Hour jelly gel polish, and then I mix some orange into it. So I will show that mixture in a second. And then I'm just using a sponge to go over the French tip. I've already cured the white for the French tip, and then we're just gonna add a little bit of like red into that. So I'm just kind of experimenting, but I want a little bit more of like a textured and dimensional look. So this first nail was kind of an experiment, but I'll show you a little bit more of like what I ended up kind of doing with the next nail. But for the Tiger Print, we're just taking a black gel polish. We're drawing a kind of curved, it's not necessarily a curved line, but they're kind of these irregular lines, right? With a little bit of like a scraggly look, a little bit of irregularity. You know, I'm using a 12mm brush, and I'm using kind of the point of my brush to control the pressure. I'm adding more pressure at the corners and then bringing that out to be a little bit thinner with just like a little bit of I'm just slightly kind of moving my hand back and forth to create that line. Now we're gonna use our etched ember gel polish. All of these polishes are from our Art Glass collection. I'm concentrating that at the center. I have cured everything underneath. And then you can just use your brush to kind of gently blend that out. So what I'm trying to do is concentrate that orange more at the center and then bring it out to the sides. And we are gonna do 2 layers of this just to help it really pop. And then I'm using like my brush to just make sure that I'm not going over the edge of the French tip. But I am kind of, I don't know what you would call this, but I'm trying to go for more of, I don't know if realistic is the right word, but I'm trying to make this a little bit more multi-dimensional, a little bit more layered versus just like orange and black, if that makes sense. So we don't want the color to look the same across the entire nail. We want it to look a little bit more concentrated at the center and then kind of going down the sides. I mean, that's kind of typical in tigers, right? You might see more color in one area, or, you know, lighter, certain, like the fur might be lighter in certain areas. So anyways, we're gonna go ahead and continue. We're drawing the smile line, and I'm keeping that first layer very thin. Honestly, if it looks a little bit streaky to me, that is okay, because I would rather use less polish, keep it super thin, and then cure that, and then go in with another layer, another thin layer. I don't think I have found a perfect one coat white gel polish for myself yet personally. Hopefully I can come out with one for my brand one day. This gel polish is very pigmented. This is a very pigmented white, but even then I feel like I wanted to use two layers. Two thin layers, just, I think if you go in with one layer, the issue that I have at least is that it ends up sometimes getting very bulky, especially for longer nails, and you don't want your French tips to look bulky. It is gonna ruin the shape of your square nail. So I have no problem doing two thin layers. So anyways, we're gonna go ahead and go in again and try to follow the smile lines to match. So I'm using a minimal amount of gel polish, but you can see it still has great coverage. But I think that second layer kind of helps smooth everything out and look like a little bit more even, and just add in a little bit more pigment. So you can use the corners of your brush to fill in the edges as needed. I'm actually not worrying about getting it perfect because I am going in with that second thin layer. But you just wanna make sure you're not adding too much product at the edges. That's what is going to add in bulk if you feel like your French tips are looking bulky, especially like hand-painted Frenchies. So this was the mixture I did with our Golden Hour gel polish, which is that yellowish orange, also from the Art Glass collection. And then I mixed a little bit of orange into that. And it came out to this mixture that I can use a sponge to just kind of dab on. It doesn't need to be super opaque. It can be quite light. Even then, when I'm kind of sponging things on, I like to go in layers. So the first layer, I don't mind, again, being less opaque. I'm gonna go in with the second layer and just kind of even that out, add a little bit more. But again, I don't want it to be overly, I'm just trying to add like a subtle like orange wash. I probably could have even done this with just the jelly, but something about the sponge kind of gives it more of that textured look. So we're just trying to make the French tips not like just the white color. We're just trying to add like a subtle orange wash that is gonna be the foundation to the nail art, so that all kind of the different layers of the colors kind of all come together once we add in all of the different details for the tiger print. So we're taking our black gel polish and we're gonna finish off these two nails. I did the other nails, but I'm gonna do these two simultaneously just to kind of show you. So I'm drawing a slightly kind of scraggly line down the center. Then I'm using my brush, as I mentioned, with the black gel polish. I'm trying to use the different pressure points of my brush. So I am using like more pressure when I want it to be thicker. So for the middle, you want it to be thinner towards the end and then thicker in the middle. So I'm adding more pressure at the center. So I'm starting at a thinner point, less pressure, and then adding more. I'm even going back in, just kind of going over some of those parts again to make them thicker, to connect more. But you're just kind of doing these, I don't know what you would call them. There's not really a great way to describe them. They're not necessarily curved lines. They almost look like a V shape. But as you can see, I'm kind of moving my hand back and forth as I'm doing this because it's supposed to have a little bit of like a scraggly look, right? But we're starting at a point, we're bringing that in slightly curved and just thickening that area up at the center where that line is just a little bit as needed. And then for the lines on the side, we're starting at a thicker point and then using less pressure at the end to make them thinner. And these are just going in between the other lines that we have drawn. So they're just kind of like short lines on the side, and you can go over them as needed as well, but just make them thinner towards the point and just kind of move your hand back and forth a little bit, and it'll give it that like slightly kind of, I keep using the word scraggly, but I don't know what better word there is. So that is this is actually my first time doing tiger print, so I actually am pretty pleased with how it turned out. So we're adding that etched ember gel polish over the center again, and again we are just taking the brush and blending that out. You could use like a blending brush, or you could just use a smaller brush. But this first layer is, again, just to add in a little bit of that color, and then we're gonna add in a second layer. I personally, like I mentioned, like to work in layers and build up the color versus adding too much is gonna be harder to remove. So don't worry about it covering up the entire nail. Don't worry about it looking uniform and even. It's not supposed to if you are trying to kind of replicate the look that I'm going for. Once that's cured, I'm gonna go in with the second layer at the center. This is gonna help concentrate that color a little bit more. And then we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing and blend that out. But I do feel like the second layer really helps the color pop more at the center versus at the edges, which is kind of what I'm going for. So I would recommend doing it in 2 layers. Even though that etched ember color that we have from our art class collection is very pigmented, I would just still recommend doing 2 layers and then really layering it on that second one. You can see I'm adding more product with my brush with that second layer at the center only, and then just dragging that out. I know I was talking about our Halloween collection earlier, but if you haven't grabbed our art glass collection, you definitely should. I use these jellies for everything. I use them for nail art, I use them as bases, I use them for shading. There's some really like functional colors in there, as well as like unique colors like this fiery orange that we're using right now, the etched ember. And jellies are just super versatile. I think they're very underrated. They can be used for so many things. Like I feel like the look that we're doing here, like the jelly just worked so well versus like an opaque orange polish. So anyways, that's pretty much it. I cured, and then I am gonna file again just to make sure that if there's any gel top coat that got onto the sides, that we get rid of that. And here's the final look. I'm absolutely obsessed with these. I did these a while ago, but I literally couldn't stop staring at them once I did them. I've never done a set like this. It was honestly like the perfect summer set going into fall. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope this helps. And as I mentioned, you can shop our products through the link in our bio, and our new Whimsy Halloween collection is available now as well.